welcome to the Transatlantic Watch Party, a TikTok live podcast that is available on TikTok live on Sundays and on Spotify as an audio podcast hereafter. I'm Cara.
I'm Dan.
And today we will be discussing 911, Season 8, Episode 7, Hot Shots.
Yes.
I have been around the TikTok and Blue Sky and X 911 fandom, so I have seen what the general opinion appears to be of this episode, so I'm very interested to hear what is your general feeling about the episode, Dan?
You mean, like, do I like it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do people not like it? For some reason?
Yes, it was not a very warmly received episode. I enjoyed it. I thought there were things to enjoy about it, but people thought it was kind of a filler kind of episode.
Oh,
and they do.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair.
Yeah, and it sort of didn't move on the storylines. And considering that we've got like the finale, the 8A finale coming up next week, it felt a bit like it wasn't leading into anything particularly interesting to happen. So that's...
No, that's fair. I get it. It's something maybe I wasn't as clued into as somebody who has not watched the show as much. I wouldn't think of that necessarily. Like enough it kept me interested. Enough was happening. It was entertaining. It was funny. There were ups and downs. And yeah, in the end, I think it was making a very good point about a serious issue in the U.S. regarding the police. But do I just go through the whole... I think we should go through the episode, like, time-wise. I think that's a better way of doing it. Just discuss it scene by scene or whatever, and then we can go through it. And that's basically how I'm taking my notes. So that's I think we should...
how I always take my notes, Dan. I just like to get an idea of, like, if you're still enjoying the show every week.
Yeah, I am. And I did try to use the bingo card. So our friend Rob gave us these bingo cards to use. And I forgot the bingo cards have there's 6 up on like a big, because you sit there. Have you ever done bingo?
Yes.
At all? Yeah. So you sit and the more you have, the better your chances of winning. So when I've been, people have like a mass of bingo cards and they're like, and they're dabbing everything. So I forgot how many I had to keep track of. But then I realized a lot of them are repeated for different cards. But then I realized that I don't understand what a lot of these things mean because I've not watched the show. So there's a lot of references in here that I did not get. So I can only really say I got one, maybe 2. Wait, I have it here in front of me. But I did not get a lot of these things that maybe were the case. I just didn't recognize them for what they were.
Yes. And you're not necessarily going to get things like series callback. I've got one on here that just says Fambly. Fambly, which I've sort of made my own meaning for, which I assume means like everyone acting like family. So I ticked that because of that bit where that like Hen and Eddie stole Buck's phone and they were like acting like little kids.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I'll accept that. That's interesting. The ones I got were somebody says Proby twice in this episode. There were 2 mentions of the word Proby. Oh, they're talking about the same Proby, but whatever. Were they? Anyway, I accepted Bobby Cooks because Bobby was in the kitchen, like setting the table and getting... I assume he was cooking. Or is that what that means?
Well, no, I didn't because Bobby is a big cook. And normally we would see him cooking, but Buck was definitely doing the cooking.
Oh yeah, that was Buck's role this episode. Okay, I get that. Okay, that makes sense. And then that was all I had actually.
All right. Well, I only used one card. I thought what I would do is pick one card and then do it through the entire series.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Until I get, which I should have explained to you that's what I had decided to.
Well, I'll do that. I'll pick the one. Okay, so I have 2 of them. Okay, the other was, so there was one more I did. The emergency is panic. I think that applies to the final emergency of the episode because that was definitely panic that made him shoot the person. So I thought that was my other one. So I have one card here with 2 ticks. I'm going to use that. I'll take that one. I'll keep that one going for the rest of the season.
Well, you see, now I feel mean because I've got way more ticks, but it's probably just because I'm noticing stuff that you don't know.
Yeah.
So I got ripped from the headlines because that's...
I don't know what that means.
It means that it's a thing that happened in real life. an
Oh,
emergency.
okay. Well, then, yes, that is something that thing that happened in real life. I was going to talk about that later. Okay, so let's start with the beginning of the episode. We start with a jewelry store heist, which is a fun, unexpected beginning. It's not something you would normally associate with a 911 call, although I guess they would call 911 as a response once the robbers burst in. But we had a different situation in this case, right? We were kind of faked out by the opening of this scene.
I thought it was going to be a setup, you know, that kind of, because we saw them sort of announcing that they were going to do it. I thought it might be an undercover sting sort of thing, you know, because they announced they were going to do it. And I know it's on the dark web, but I'm sure the police have some people sneaking around there. And Athena did say, "Careful who you let in your Discord," which I thought was great. But I just wrote down, flash mob robbery. Is that more or less annoying than a flash mob proposal?
Or just a flash mob in general?
Yeah.
Flash mobs are so 2011. I don't know. I don't tell you. We have never gone as hard as we did on flash mobs as we did in that year. I didn't even get that it was a flash mob robbery until way later, and that like his name was Flash Rob and all that stuff. I didn't clue into that until later in the episode. I'm like, oh, now I get it. So I was late to that one. I was not paying attention to that.
And there were a couple of little things, the kind of things that I always have questions about. Like, he was in there, they all had masks on, and yet he takes his mask off to speak to Athena. And I'm like, that's not even because plot. You could have let him, you idiot. And there was also one bit where they were like picking up all the jewelry, and we saw very clearly that all of the robbers had gloves on. Smart. Except one guy was just there with his bare hand. I stopped touching stuff.
Yeah, not very well organized or thinking of a thing. He's flash mobbed. All right. So yeah, then we find out.
And then we got, of course, the point where, but poor Athena, in a very pride comes before a fall moment, finds Flash Rob, you know, and it's well done, Athena. You kept your eyes out, you know, you were still in focused work mode, and you didn't miss him, and you got him, and then you gave him this big speech.
I have another one. Big speech was another thing on my bingo card.
Oh, you can have that then. Just take that. And she gave him the big yes, Auntie. It's just said she shouldn't have monologued. You should never monologue, whether you're the good guy or the bad guy. Don't monologue. And then the guy ran away, and she pulled a hammy, and it was so awful.
Pretty funny though. And then he turns back and gives her a retort, and then jumps away. That was pretty good.
Yeah, he does some parkour and gets away.
Mm-hmm. And then we cut to Buck baking. Buck is he's eating his feelings, I guess, or he's baking his feelings. Every time he's upset about Tommy and feels like he wants to call Tommy, he bakes. And I felt it was weird that they needed to explain this a couple of times. Like, I don't understand, like, he explained it at the beginning, and what do you call them again? Chimney and Mandy, what's their couple name?
Madney.
They come in to visit. They've given their daughter, I have a comment about their babysitting tactics, but they got a babysitter. They're coming over to visit for dinner, I guess, and he's just baking everything. And this did result in Chimney's best line of the episode, which came in 4 minutes and 13 seconds in. "I love loaf," or was like, "Don't discourage him. I love loaf" was the full line.
That is the one I wrote down. Yes, that was Chimney's best line. Did you notice that Chimney wasn't at work for the second half of the episode?
Why not? Why wasn't he at work?
Well, he wasn't in the scene where they were messing around with Buck's phone, and he wasn't in the scene where Brad turned up. Right. So I like to think that because Chimney can't keep a secret, and when Buck finds out in that scene, when he figures out that Maddie's pregnant, and Chimney got all, "Don't tell anyone," I was like, "Sir, you are not one to talk." And I just wonder if he went, "I can't go to work until we're allowed to say anything because I'm going to tell everyone."
They visit Buck and they get a babysitter and whatever. Then later on in the episode, Buck is the babysitter. They just drop off their daughter with Buck unannounced. They just pop by with their little girl and say, "Here you go," boom, and they take off. Now that was probably for Buck too, as much as Buck is.
That is also a series callback.
Oh,
Because canonically, if Buck is upset, you give him a kid.
okay.
Because it happens with Christopher in season 3. Like, Buck is off work because he's been injured, and like he's just rotting in bed and won't get up, and he's really miserable. Understandably so. And so Eddie just comes round and like says, "Oh, Chris, I'm leaving Chris with you today," and just goes off to work. And so, and that's sort of to cheer Buck up. So if you want to cheer Buck up, you give him a child, and it works.
That makes sense. I didn't realize that. And I was just thinking that at first I thought, well, what kind of parents are these where they're just leaving every, twice in one episode, they're leaving their daughter and going out and doing something. But then I realized if she's pregnant, they're taking advantage of the time they have, because once that baby's born, can't go out. That's really what happens, right? When you have children. So they have a little window here where they've got one that's old enough to be babysat by herself and can go to Buck and can go to people or whatever. And then they're just kind of taking a little bit of time for themselves, I think, is what they're doing.
And the last time Maddie was pregnant, it was the pandemic, and Jim was living with Buck, so they didn't get to see each other at all, really, during that pregnancy. So they're just making the most of the time that they've got.
I think so, yeah.
One thing that came up, Buck said, Jim said to him, "You should jump back in the pond." And Buck said something quite interesting. He said, "I don't know which pond to jump back into." And a number of people in the 911 fandom recently have been discussing whether or not Buck knows he is bisexual. Because we've been desperate for him to say he's bisexual. And every time Oliver Stark talks about him in interviews, he's bisexual. But he's never said it out loud. And in the last episode, Maddie made that awful comment about I wonder how many men Abby's turned gay, and Buck did not. It was the perfect opportunity for him to say, "Excuse me, I'm bisexual." And it made people think with this comment, like when he said, "I don't know whether I'm meant to go back to women or men." Dude, you get to go back to both because you're bisexual.
Well, I think that's what he meant by don't know which pond to go back into. I'm certain that's what that meant.
Just go back into both of the ponds, sir. You'll do well. It's fine.
Dad, he should not jump back into the pond. It's too soon. It's way too soon. Yeah. Unless you just want to, get some out of your system, it's not really a good time to go back into some kind of relationship or get involved with somebody. And I think he knows that. That's why he's baking. That's why the baking seems to be dominating everything. And that we see that continue into the scene later on.
He has a tendency to sort of not let go of relationships very well. Abby from the first season, when she left him, she didn't tell him. But it was obvious. And months later, he was still living in her apartment and telling everyone he had a girlfriend. And she was barely even calling him anymore. He was just following her Instagram. They were obviously not a couple. He's not really... he's not very good at going, okay, that one's done. I can move on now. So, yeah, maybe that's why we got the second reminder later on in the episode.
Maybe. It was weird. It kind of felt a bit repetitive. And I get he would be I get you would be telling that to everybody you would see. So maybe that's just kind of what that was. It's you would explain this to multiple people if you're in that situation.
Also, I think when we get to that scene, I will explain one of the reasons why I think they kept it in, because there was one line in particular that I think they were so happy that they wrote and so happy that they got into that script that they were like, well, now we have to keep this entire thing. Okay. So I'll tell you when we get it.
What's next?
It is, it's when they get called to the hot shots. So you had that amazing 911 call where it was Brad. And the woman recognised him immediately. She was like, "Oh my God, is this Brad Torrance?" And he was like, "It is, love. Send help." It was really
funny. Yeah. That's your quippy 911 call. The episode.
And then, and we get the guy hanging from the ladder truck, from the ladder, which again, series callback, because that's what happened when Buck got struck by lightning at the end, in the middle of season 6. And and they never mentioned it. Like, no one looked at that and went, oh, this brings back horrible memories. Like, Chimney didn't make a joke. Like, nobody mentioned anything, which was weird. But the brilliant thing was in the background, and again, series callback that you will unfortunately have missed. There was a guy wandering around with a bit of rebar sticking through his head. Right, through his forehead. That happened to Chimney in series 1.
Jeez. That's pretty funny.
That was amazing.
That's hilarious. Oh, man. So yeah, we learned, and so the reason that we go there is they have this emergency, right? We learn that Gerard is kind of letting the actors basically do what they want. It's kind of the opposite of what we expected. I thought that Gerard was going to be all tough with them and kind of whip them into shape, and that's not what's happened at all. They don't like Gerard, and he is basically kind of like, so he's kind of like subservient to them, and they want to get rid of him. And they want Bobby back, basically.
Well, I mean, we say they, but we only know about Brad. And Brad,
yeah,
a special boy, and he's got a very special relationship with Bobby. But all I wrote was, oh, good, Gerard is having a horrible time.
I said, Gerard is not happy. And he was like, but it was fun because he's like complaining, and he's like, oh, I'll get you your latte, sir. And he's all like kind of, he's just sucking up to him because he knows that he doesn't like him. But he somehow doesn't understand how his personality could. That was the best part of this episode, was when Bobby's trying to explain to him how much of a dick he is. He's like, how could I be a dick? It's like, dude, come on, look at yourself. Look at the way you act. How can you not understand this? But the irony, I said, is that Brad is the exact same as we learn in the restaurant later on. Brad is a dick as well. They're both just self-serving assholes who like treat other people like crap. Like Gerard treats the coffee girl like crap, and he treats the server like crap. So they're the same person, basically. And I think that what Brad is really upset about is that he uses Bobby as his muse, as his like to model behavior on when he acts as whatever the captain in the series. And he's upset because Bobby's not there anymore, and Gerard can't give him that. Gerard can't give him that great, like, iconic fire captain thing that Bobby does, right? So he's upset.
I mean, if Brad in his real life is a bit of a dick, as we know he is, he probably doesn't want to be that on screen. He wants to play a character that everyone loves. So he's not going to take, like, inspiration from Gerard as this hard-ass, straight down the line, racist, which you haven't seen, but definitely had. Trust me, it's happened. Like, awful guy. He's not going to want to play that kind of character on screen, because he wants desperately so much for everyone to love him. So yes, but it is nice to know that Gerard has found a job that he really likes, and he's terrified of losing it. Like, that makes my little heart happy. Couldn't happen to a nicer bloke.
Yeah, that's fair. And so we'll come back to that in a second, but we go back to Athena getting a new partner. It was interesting because I'm thinking about this new character we have, Sparks, and I wasn't sure at the beginning of the episode whether or not this was going to be like a new regular character or if it's just going to be like a one-off, because I realized that we don't have a lot of police characters in this show. It's mostly firefighters and paramedics, the 911 staff, and then Athena's like and then her boss. We see her boss on a regular basis, but that's it for the cops. Like, we don't see a lot of the cops that she works with. So I'm like, oh, is she going to get a partner now that's going to be a regular character? I don't think Sparks is going to be a regular character after what happened, but
maybe not.
It's an interesting scenario, and that kind of shows that they do have the opportunity to bring in characters that way. Or maybe not now. No, she's not going to get partners anymore.
Well, she did say at the end of the episode, skipping ahead, she did say she wanted one. So, we might. But I watched The Rookie, and you don't get a rookie in The Rookie unless you're a TRO, like a training something officer, so you have to be qualified to have a rookie. So, like, what he was doing with her, I was like, is it like, technically it's kind of more of a ride along because she's not got the training to train him. She's just going with her gut, which is good. I'm not, sometimes, again, things you will not have seen previously. Michael, Athena's ex-husband, and her 2 children were pulled over by 2 white cops in season 3. And one of the cops pulled a gun on Harry, the young son, and it got all out of hand, and and Michael was left absolutely broken by it, and the kids were traumatized, and they went home and told Athena about it, and she was like, well, you shouldn't have argued with the cops. Yeah. I never quite forgiven her for that. And then last season, she thought a guy had burnt down her house, a guy who has been through awful things, awful things. And she made the assumption, and she went round to his house, found his address, went round to his house and pulled a gun on the guy. She's not in uniform. She's a complete civilian at that point, and she threatened that man's life. And so I'm not big on Athena as a cop.
Oh, okay. Well, they certainly built her up in this episode to be this awesome, amazing police and the best cop ever. That's why this guy wanted to be with her, be partnered with her, because he admires her, looks up to her. And I thought it was an interesting conversation. Then when she goes to talk to Hen about it later, and she's like, I don't know where this guy's head's at. And I think that's an interesting conversation for them to be having about the police force in this day and age, when you're not sure what kind of people are applying for these jobs and going through this training and why they want to take this job. Like he talks about having the power when he's on patrol and that kind of stuff. And that's dangerous, right? That's kind of scary when people talk like that. So I think that was a good conversation for them to have. And it really made me understand her. At first I thought she was just annoyed with him for being kind of a keener, which I guess I was kind of annoyed with him too for that reason, but it made me understand her reasoning a bit better. Although I think they really had to escalate things quickly to get to where it got by the end of the episode. I don't think it really would happen that quickly necessarily. But I get the point they're trying to make with that.
Yeah, she did. She made the point that he's kind of a hothead.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that leads to the kind of situations that we get. I mean, she's very clear about it, and it's absolutely how it pans out. But I did like that she had we've skipped a scene. But anyway, we'll carry on talking about this and then go back. She pulls have you ever watched The Rookie?
No.
No. There's a character in that called Tim, and he's one of the training officers, and he does things called Tim tests, where he's like, he does this horrible, shocking thing, and he pulls out a Tim test, and you never really know as the rookie whether he's testing you or whether he's asking you a genuine question, and he keeps you very out of balance the whole time, and it's very annoying. But he does one at the very beginning where him and his rookie are chatting, and then he just stops the car all of a sudden and shouts at her, "Where are we? I've been shot." Because he's making the point to her that she has to always know what street they're on. So when she videos back up, she knows where she is. And so when Athena did that thing and was like, close your eyes, how many people are on that bus stop? And he doesn't know. And she's like, bang, 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 you're dead, and so am I. I was like, oh, it's a Tim test.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
They're on the same network now, so I'm desperate for them to do like a crossover Rookie 911 thing. I think it'll be brilliant.
Okay, what did we skip? What was the scene we skipped?
We skipped the scene that we didn't need, which was Buck again baking because of me. And this is so. First of all, something I noticed is, do you remember last week when Eddie was experiencing joy and he was dancing? And then Buck arrived and he went and sat on the sofa, and Eddie climbed over the back of the sofa. When Buck called everyone for dinner, Eddie jumped over the sofa again. And I was like, oh, he's still doing joy. That's so cute. But then the reason I think they kept it in is that Eddie said, "Since when did you become a master baker?" And Buck replied, "When Tommy dumped me." And I was like, masturbator? Like, that's what that joke is. So I just think they were like, well, we can't cut this. It's the funniest line of the show. Like, it was so awful, and I adored it. Obviously, that's absolutely my silly kind of humor.
I noticed that one as well. I will say, while we're on the subject of best lines, I'm going to say the best line of the episode was not from Chimney or Master Baker. It was from Brad at the end when he says, "It blasted the entitlement out of me like a truth enema." That's the best line. That was a great line. So that's one good one.
And a line that only Brad Torrance could commit to. Like, only he would say that, and it was absolutely brilliant. There was a little moment. There's been a big discussion again in the fandom about how the whole Chris being gone has not been dealt with. Like, it was a massive end of season moment that Chris decided to run away to Texas. Not run away exactly, because Eddie knew he was going, but that's a big heartbreaking thing for Eddie to deal with. And it's really never, like, we've had the party at the beginning, the Zoom party thing that went horribly wrong. And since then we've had like 2 other mentions of Chris. And one of them it wasn't even a mention, but it just made me think of him because Buck was saying he's constantly checking his phone to see if he's had a text. And Eddie said, "I understand that." And Buck is talking about Tommy and Eddie's talking about Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, just somebody mention the son. Like, Buck and Chris are ludicrously close. He's like verging on co-parenting, you know, and they've not talked about it. This kid's been gone for like 5 months, and they've it seems like they've really dropped the ball there.
Yeah, possibly, or they're saving it for next episode, for the finale episode, to have something dramatic happen.
I know, I don't want them to rush it. I wish this is a show that they have a trauma and then they never mention it again, and you know they always do that sort of thing. So they're not really a show for sort of building a storyline through many episodes. So sometimes it does feel a little like there could be more emotional heft, you know, if they just sort of dripped things in throughout. You know, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Just keep reminding the general audience who don't watch it like I do that there is a kid that, you know, like, I think whether Bobby said it or Eddie said it, having a kid is like having your heart walk around outside of your body. And it's in Texas. His heart is in Texas, and I think he's probably thinking about it more than we're seeing.
Probably, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kids are messing around, and they steal Buck's phone, and Buck goes, "Cap, can you help me?" And genuinely, the first time I saw that, I thought he said Dad. And I thought that wouldn't have been wrong. Do you know, it had such, like, a family, like, if you don't stop, I'll pull this car over vibes, you know? And then the chief interrupts them. And what I loved was the fact that everyone else looked super embarrassed, but Bobby didn't bat an eye. You know, he was just like, yeah, these are my people and I love them.
Yeah. Nice to see you. Nice to stop by.
Yeah. And so that's when we find out that Bobby has been given the task of making Gerard become a more likable version of himself, to which he says, "With all due respect, I'm a fire captain, not a miracle worker."
I wrote that one down too. I thought that was a kind of a Star Trek reference. I felt like that was a nod to Bones in Star Trek, where he says, I'm a doctor, not a this, that, or whatever. He would always say that like that. So I feel like that was kind of a nod to
Very nice. Very nice. And then, yes, so we had the Athena scene in the car. Then we get Hen and Athena. And that's when I sort of realised that this episode was about Athena and Bobby both having someone who's obsessed with them.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And then we go back to the Hot Shots. And that's where we get Bobby talking to Gerard, saying, like, you can be a dick. And Gerard crying.
Gerard gets emotional. And this is why I noticed it a couple different times in the episode, but this is when I wrote, those coffee cups are empty, because the way they hold those cups, very obviously they're empty. There's no weight to them. It's an empty cup, but they're supposed to be something in them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And somebody noticed what they called a mistake, and me, as a TV mistakes girly, I'm going to say it wasn't. When Bobby walks onto the set, he's talking. He knows everyone's name. That's one of the things that Bobby would do. He's learned everybody's name. Gerard knows nobody except probably Brad, and he says, "Hi, Callum." Callum is the name of the guy who plays Brad. And somebody went, "Oh, did anyone notice that he said hi, Callum?" And I'm like, yeah, he just named another guy Callum, probably as a joke, probably as a moment. But yes, so Gerard is scared of Brad essentially because he thinks he's going to take his job away, and he talks about always having to fill Bobby's shoes, and Bobby is this unmatchable guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not for some people, but for you, yes.
Be a decent human being and you'd be okay. You don't have to do a lot. That seems to be the general quality of Bobby that everyone likes, that he's a good guy and he does the right thing.
Yeah. Just to say, there's a question in the comments on TikTok. Ante said, did I notice the mistake on Book's phone? And yes, I know about it, but I saw it in someone else's video. Did you, that when Tommy was texting Buck and the bubbles came up on his phone, the text said Buck at the top. So it was like he was texting himself. He should have said Tommy, they didn't think about this. But it's like any phone thing, when a real pet peeve is when they open up a chat with someone they've known for years, and it's right at the top, the last message, they've never spoken before. There are computer programs that will do this for you, or green screen it, but just make it look a little bit more believable.
One page of fake dialogue, seriously, is this much space you could go up and have it come down a little bit, and then have the thing. That's all you need. A little bit of effort. That's all you need to do. All right.
So we've got Gerard crying, and then we get the bit, and this was where I noticed the coffee cups. The Athena and Sparks scene at the car, or as I learned from the Rookie, the shop. They call it the shop. He's been on the dark web, and he thinks he's found Flash Rob. And she looks through the pictures, and the thing that she notices is that they're always in the back of a van that's got a logo on it, which is monumentally stupid of the guy. But I suddenly started thinking, is he a massive faker? Because he kept going, "Oh, this is my haul." And I thought, is he just a delivery guy? And he's just taking pictures of the boxes in the back of his van. And he's never stolen anything in his life. And he goes around. But before he does his deliveries, when he's got all this stuff. But it wasn't that. I was wrong. He was using the van to cart things around. And they go to the place and they ask the guy, and it turns out Flash Rob is there. They can catch him. He runs away again. Athena can't chase him. And Sparks jumps onto the back of the van. Now, I don't know whether you can tell me, what does he think that's going to achieve?
Well, I guess what he ultimately did was he thinks he's going to climb over the van. He wants, like they said, they even referenced, he said, pull the lethal weapon, which is exactly what I was thinking of. Actually kind of reminded me of a scene in RoboCop, very similar scene where they're chasing after, but that's RoboCop. That's not Sparks. What did they say? He had head full of steam or something. I can't remember how they described him. But doesn't think about things before he does them. And so he jumps onto the back of that car or van without thinking. He's just kind of clinging for dear life.
Because I'm just like, what? When we see people do that on TV a lot, and I'm like, do they have a tracker on them? So if Athena hadn't been able to chase them down in the car, they'd have been able to find the van because the guy was attached to the van. I just don't know I don't know, as a police officer, if you would ever be trained to cling to a vehicle like that.
No, certainly not. No, I think it was just the point of it was to show he was very much like Riggs from Lethal Weapon in that moment. That was like him running around. But you know what? You realize that at the end of that scene that he didn't really need anything because they had him blocked off. Like they stopped him. They were in the way. Like he was not going anywhere. And so regardless of whether or not that guy had jumped on the van, I think they still would have gotten it.
They fixed that very quickly. Do you know what I mean? Like, Maddie was on it. She got that done. And, like, then at the end of it, you know, everyone's shaking his hand and he's like the hot young thing, you know, and he turns around to Athena and says, "Thanks for the assist." And I wrote in all caps, "Fuck you, sir."
Yeah. Right a dick. Like, that's just, yeah, man.
This was an episode full of dicks. It really was. Like,
Yeah,
Brad,
and
Brad, Sparks.
yeah, but it is trying to say something about the police service. Does it? I mean, you said that there was incidents before where there were like white cops pulling over black people and stuff like that. So they have kind of done this kind of stuff in the past. But it's good to keep it going because this was based on a real incident that happened where this police, and I believe it happened close to me. I think it was in Minneapolis or Minnesota, where this officer pulled. She thought she was pulling her taser. She pulled her gun and shot somebody. Right. So this is a guy.
Her name was Kim Potter, and his name was Duante Wright. And it also made me think of Philandro Castile, who was the guy whose girlfriend was live streaming it, and they had a kid in the back when he was shot.
Right. Well, there's a kid in the back of this one too. And so it seems to be combining these different elements of these different ones to show like, hey, this is stuff that's happening in our country. And even before all that stuff happened, even the whole sovereign citizen thing, I have seen, like, I've gone down a rabbit hole on TikTok for those videos of people like filming their encounters with police because they're declaring themselves a sovereign citizen and all other stuff. So
yeah, I'm not driving, I'm traveling. And the only thing I sort of didn't like about that was that they were taking something that if they were combining those two things, they both happened to black men, and they made the victim a white woman that we kind of weren't meant to have sympathy for anyway, because...
Yeah, she started the whole thing, right? She's the one who escalated it by not rolling down her windows.
Yeah, and even Maddie. I mean, I wasn't sure how I felt about Maddie being like, but she was like very clear. If you don't talk to them, they will break into your car. Like that, you know, just do that. And I did kind of enjoy her very passive aggressive rolling down the window like an inch. That was fun. But when we see those people on cop shows, because I think that's my only experience of them being on like FBI and SWAT and stuff. They are never the good guys. Like, when we're always meant to kind of go, oh, these are outliers, or they're, we're kind of meant to laugh at them or whatever. And so I was like, I wish they'd sort of made them a little bit more neutral, and that he just got worked up.
Well, I think they're making an effort for him to get worked up, because I noticed that during that whole exchange, he was around the other side of the car. His partner was the one talking to her, trying to get her rolled down the window, and he was kind of like he was twitching around and like looking through the window and stuff, and he looked like he was like hyped up and like getting himself worked up about stuff.
Yeah,
I just felt like he was like just putting off this weird energy, like I'm ready to shoot somebody, like that kind of stuff.
Absolutely thought he could sort out that situation. I don't think he was ready to shoot someone at the very beginning. It wasn't until she said, "Oh, your uncle's a freeman," like a free person in Montana. How disappointed he must be. And that's the first sort of criticism that this guy's got, because everyone since he's joined the academy obviously thinks the sun shines out of his arse, and he did not take it well. And I mean, yeah, the only thing I'm trying to explain myself better with the sovereignty thing is that I feel like they did that to sort of slightly lessen the impact of what we would have felt if they'd pulled over if they'd shown it to be a black person. Like, that would have been a massive thing. And so yes, so then Like, he shoots her. He doesn't pick up his taser, which, I mean, I know because, again, I watched The Rookie, so I'm essentially a cop. I'm essentially fully trained now. You keep your taser on the other side.
I do. I think even I know that, right? Your gun is on your left side, your right side, and your taser's on your left side.
Yes.
Right?
And I don't know whether it's to do with your dominant hand. So if you're left-handed, your gun is on your left and your taser's on your right. I'm not sure about that. But they're on different sides for a reason, you know. And so he picks the wrong one and he shoots her. And then he can't even, administer first aid properly. Like, he's not good at his job.
Doesn't know anything. Yeah, he clearly wasn't paying attention during that part of the class, right? Yeah.
Like, you know, I think Auntie said it earlier in the comments. People can be good at their job on paper, but not out in the wilds doing their job. And, you know, policing is very much about the, you know, forward-facing, front-facing, public-facing interactions. And he's not good at it. And what really upset me was that Athena had clocked him very early. She, you know, brought up her concerns with her boss, and she was proved right, and she was horrified. And then she shook his hand when he was going in for his, you know, sort of official evaluation, like whatever they do.
Judgment. I'm sure he was getting like fired or whatever, suspended, and
yes,
whatever you can do.
You never know. I mean, he might have just been moved off to some other department, but the fact that she walked out of there with her crutch, which was very pointed, that she shook his hand and, like, I think she called him son, and I was just like, I don't know, I was just really annoyed that she did that. I thought she could have been a little bit more. No, she doesn't have to be horribly offhand, but she didn't need to, like. She looked sympathetic, and I was like, no.
I think that she knows that he's done. He's not going to be a cop anymore, and then, like, just basically something else. I wonder if this is going to lead into something with her. Like, she's getting older. She can't chase the crooks anymore. Is she going to move into, like, a police academy position? Maybe she'll start training the young squads or whatever, and we'll get a new police academy.
Yeah, I'd like to see her at the academy. That would be good. Because it was very much, there was a lot of talk about age and retirement, and, like, she doesn't want to do that. She definitely doesn't want to retire. And yeah, so that would be a really nice, rather than sort of putting her into, like, a management position like her bosses, you know.
Right.
It would be nice to see her with the youngsters or the newbies, because they're not all young. But yeah, that would be really good to see. It's a good idea.
And then you had this scene in the restaurant where Bobby takes Brad out for drinks or whatever to discuss his and he just, like, doesn't even get to it. They, like, as soon as the drinks are delivered, Brad loses his shit over the olives. Like, yeah. I thought he was joking at first. I really did think he was joking. And then I said, oh no, he is not joking. This is quite funny.
Yeah. This is awful. And it's just, she just gave him an extra olive. Like, she thought she was doing something nice. He's a famous person, and he was nice to her, and she was like, oh, I'll give him an extra olive. And also,
they're not paid. They're
in, and I heard him.
I had the subtitles on.
All right, okay. So you don't know whether you understood him or not. But I understood him, obviously, with his terrible fake English accent. But he, like, because he is English, he is British, but he's really laying it on thick. And as soon as she put the glass down, I thought, that's a pitted olive. And I thought that's what he was going to complain about first. But no, it gave him, like, a second layer of things to complain about. And I just, like, I had seen a still, I think, from that scene of, like, Bobby and him quite close together and obviously looking like they weren't happy. And I'd sort of made up an idea of what might be happening in my head. And I thought, you know, maybe Brad had, like, sort of stalked him to a restaurant, you know, like, oh, hey, you're here and I'm here, you know. And it was just a bit weird. But I didn't realise that it was Bobby, like, taking him down very publicly. And everyone was watching and filming and doing whatever. But, like, if you're a celebrity, do you make a scene that loudly?
I mean, not in this day and age, but maybe the point is that he didn't realize that, and there are still a few people in this world that would do that, given like in there in that situation. I could probably see there's probably a few people who would do that. So yeah, I mean, it definitely would have happened like 10 years ago, right? That's definitely something we would see. Or when was the Christian Bale one? That was the last big one I can remember when he freaked out on that first.
He screamed at someone on set.
Yeah, that was like the main one of those things, right?
Yeah. He thought, I'm on a film set. There's absolutely certainly nobody that's going to record this.
And then that's where we had, and then we have, of course, the backlash. They put him into a coma on the show.
So we had the restaurant scene, then we had the Dante Wright Philando Castile moment, and then we got into Athena using a crutch and repeating Hen's words about, like, I might not be as fast as I used to, but I'm smart. I'm wiser. And then, yes, they put me in a coma. Again, series callback. Book was in a coma. Put me in a coma. Absolutely brilliant. And the whole, he's behind me, isn't he? Like...
But it's funny because he is now he's shadowing Bobby on the he's like, what do you say, saddle up, let's saddle up, boys, whatever his line is he made up.
Did it. They had the alarms went off. He got on the fire truck and went, let's saddle up, boys, and then slammed the door in their faces.
So this should be fun. So we'll get this for at least one episode. I've learned this so much about the show is that it'll deliver for at least the next episode on something, and then we'll see what happens with that. But it'll be fun to have him tagging along for some calls next week. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, somebody said, what does this guy have over the chief? Like, does Brad Torrance have some kind of blackmail?
Yeah, they do kind of they hinted that, and they're not wrong that I'm sure these productions pay a lot of taxes and a lot of, like, they put a lot of money, and here where I live, there's a lot of movie productions, and they put a lot into our economy, and governments really court these things. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if this production holds. I mean, maybe not so much in LA because that city has movie productions going on everywhere. But it makes sense to me that they would have power over city council like that, and they would be able to kind of say, bring me this guy.
Yeah, and I think as well, he was very specific, like, these firefighter shows give us lots of money, and so I don't know whether that's, like, true, and the show is dropping in a little fact there about themselves, like they're a firefighter show, and they get lots of money to the firefighters,
They probably do. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case, right? So yeah, that made a lot of sense. So now we have Brad on with the crew, and I know, the only other like ongoing storyline is the Chris thing, really, that they haven't really addressed in a while. I think they will address it next week.
I mean, people are pointing out that if they don't mention it next week, if they don't deal with something to do with it, I think it's been confirmed that the that it's stopping until March, that it will come back in March as though it is March. It will be March on the show. And if that's true, he will have been gone for like 9 months. And that seems absolutely beyond belief. I know Eddie doesn't think he deserves forgiveness and that he really is struggling with that sort of aspect. But, and he said about waiting for Chris to text him, so it sounds like Chris isn't talking to him. When he mentioned about Chris finding trick-or-treating cringe, it was his mum that had told him that. I don't know if he's spoken directly, really, to Chris for months. And I'm like, Eddie, fight for your child. Like, I know that he's like, I know it's lovely that you're like, I want him to be able to express his anger at me, and like, I don't want to trap him in a house with me and make him feel awful. So I'm going to let him do this one thing. He's 14 years old. You're his dad. You put your foot down.
I think that's part of what these characters it's with his arc or whatever, right? Because I think he's realizing he's starting to feel joy in himself. You know, you're talking about leaping over the couch. So he's still expressing that. He's still kind of coming around, and he's going to start to feel his own self-worth as a result of that. And so then he's going to start fighting for what he wants. And what he wants, of course, is to be with his son, spend some more time with his son. I think he's going to have to go there and talk to him. It's not going to be a Zoom call kind of a thing. He's got to go to Texas for some reason. I worry that the only thing that can bring him out there is an emergency. Right? These are the only languages people speak is like call 911 and we'll respond to it. So I don't know how they're going to get him to respond to an emergency in Texas, but they'll figure something out, I'm sure.
I like the idea though that it might be a nice thing if he's just like, I'm trying to find joy in my life, and the thing that brings me the most joy is my son. I'm going to go and get my son. That would be nice. And then the other thing, Ante just mentioned Bethina, they are still homeless.
Oh, yeah. They haven't really addressed that whole thing.
Fully been sorted, but nobody cares anymore. They've moved on. You know, we'll find out when they move into our house. We'll find out.
Now, what I realize is coming up, not this week, but the week after, is the American Thanksgiving. So it might be a Thanksgiving episode. He might go to Texas for Thanksgiving. That's not going to happen. I don't know if they have announced this stuff ahead of time or as far as they having themed episodes, but sometimes they'll do that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've had Christmas episodes before. That's why we were upset we weren't going to get a Christmas episode this year, because it's not going to be on.
Well, it doesn't work out for the break, right? But this time, like if it's close to Thanksgiving, they will often do a Thanksgiving themed episode. So that could be one way to get him to Texas to have the conversation with Chris about what's going on. Like that, that's got to, I think you're right. That's got to happen at some point, right? And so we got to get Eddie to Texas then. Where in Texas do they live? What part of Texas?
El Paso.
Okay, so it's near the border. Okay. Interesting.
So I have no idea. From things that I've read, it might be 800 miles away. I'm not sure.
Well, within the States, everything's just a plane ride, right? That's basically everything's within flying distance. So, okay, we got to wrap things up. My phone is almost dead, actually. Before we go, I know we were messaging back and forth about the break. I think we should do Pan Am. For those who are listening, we're gonna do. There's a long break. 14. Is it a 14-week break for this show?
Spot on 14 weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we might not be able to do it every week, but if not, we could do like 2 episodes together or something like that. We can figure out, because it is over the holidays, and I don't know what my schedule is going to be like necessarily. But as long as we keep kind of Sunday afternoons free, we can still do this and talk about Pan Am.
Yes, that absolutely works for me, and I've heard good things about it, so I think that's a good idea.
I started watching the first episode and I got about half an hour in and I went, this seems like a good one we could talk about, because it's very specific. It's very like a short-lived thing we could talk about. I mean, it got good reviews. I think the only reason it was canceled is because it was an expensive show and it was didn't do well in ratings. So we could talk about that as well. But yeah, the cast looks really good. It looks like it's got a very, very solid cast.
Yeah, I didn't know. You said Margot Robbie's in it, which I didn't know. But I did know it's Christina Ricci, right?
Yeah, Ricci's there, yeah, and David Harbour is in the first episode. I think he's just a guest. So yeah, there's some recognizable faces for sure.
Brilliant. So yes, that's definitely doable. So during the mid-season break of 911, we will watch Pan Am.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. So if you've reached the end of the podcast on Spotify, and because we don't need to tell you this, if you're on TikTok, you already know who we are. I am A Quiet Life with Me, and Dan is Dan Watches Movies, and you can find us both on TikTok. And thank you for joining us. And Dan, I will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.